So hello and welcome to Keough's Corner. This week we have a great panel of folks who were instrumental in running an event at the middle school recently called Pathways to the Future. It was a fabulous first-time event, but my guests are Jessica Garbowski, who is our Instructional Technology Coordinator, Paula Martel from Easton Middle, and Kerri Murphy, who is a math and computer science teacher at Oliver Ames High School. So I know that you were all involved at various levels, so I'll just fire out some questions. But how did this whole event come to be? Like, what started it? What prompted it? Why do it? And tell the folks at home maybe just exactly what it was.
Okay.
Kerri?
So we're part of a STEM education team in town.
Which is?
And it represents different people in the community, businesses, educators, nonprofits. We have a whole group of people who are interested in presenting. It's really STEAM, S-T-E-A-M, so science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And we're interested in offering opportunities for people to maybe get better at these things or have more interest in them, both students and teachers.
To think about careers in these fields. Because what's prompting that? Because you hear, like, the folks at home, might hear about STEM or STEAM and say, okay, science, technology, engineering, and math, but yes, but why? Why is that
Well,
so
there are a
important
number
right
of
now?
reasons. There are more job opportunities. There's onshoring of manufacturing from coming back from other countries to the U.S. There are gaps in our education in those fields compared to other countries. And therefore, we're importing workers where we could be growing them at home, so to speak.
That's a pretty good reason.
Yeah, and in education, 21st century skills, this is really a big push. Problem solving, collaboration, communication, and using technology. And these STEAM topics really tie in across the curriculum these skills that students will need for the future. So we kind of work together to provide opportunities for students in that way.
So that's really what the STEAM committee and the push for STEAM in Easton has been about, and there have been some great events. This one in particular, though, well, I'll explain a little bit, included many volunteers from neighboring communities who work in STEAM-related fields, set up to explain to kids what it is they do. And the kids were able to travel about at will to the kind of the tables that were of interest to them. And so how many people were there? Do you remember? Or how many, do you know how many?
We do.
Yeah.
There were 26 companies and 14 educational organizations.
Wow. This is quite a few.
Yes.
And I know that there'll be some video involved in this program, so people at home will be able to see exactly what it looked like. But that's a heck of a lot of exposure for kids. And were there any in particular that you thought just jumped out at the kids? Or I know I had my personal favorite, which was the folks, I've forgotten their name, who had set up human spines.
Oh yeah, that was one of the favorites.
Dupuis Synthesis is the name of the company.
Dupuis Synthesis? Yes. And that was a really, really cool exhibit. Basically, a sample human spine, but then how would you attach rods in that spine if somebody had curvature or perhaps some kind of injury and they had, you've heard about people having a rod put in their spine. This was it, and it was right on the table, and the kids actually got to practice almost putting the rivets in. It was really, really cool.
That was one of the favorites, actually, that the
Yeah.
kids said too.
What others, though? I saw some.
There was
really
a
fabulous.
line at a mile long for the cookie decorating that they were doing. So what was that one?
That was Southeastern Regional, not the high school, but the college, so Culinary Arts.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
that was
I
a
think
career.
it's Southeastern Tech.
Yeah. So that one
that's
was
kind
a
of
big
the
one.
art piece, you know, the decorating, and of course bring sweets and food, and they will come.
That's true.
But there's lots of math and cooking, measuring, and understanding how the ingredients will interact, whether you'll get rise out of bread, for example.
Yes, exactly. So and so, Paula, you work at Northeastern Machine, and you were there with Mr. Diamond. It's Paul. Paul Diamond, and what kinds of things were you finding that you were talking to kids about?
So we do an activity at our table that's a marshmallow activity, actually, where the kids have to move marshmallows with chopsticks by whatever means they deem necessary in a 30-second window. And it's an icebreaker for us because we're talking to the students about the fine motor skills of machining. Most of the parts that we make are very tiny, small pieces of metal and plastic. So it's a fine motor skill activity, but also we're always under a deadline. Our customer needs parts on a certain day, a certain time. They're putting together a larger piece of equipment, and all of the components need to come together in some kind of a schedule in order to make that happen. So the marshmallow is kind of a fun way to get them started, and kids like to compete against their friends. I think even you and the assistant superintendent had a contest.
Yeah.
So
we didn't count though, did we, to see who won?
No.
No, thank
We'll
you.
just say you
told
won.
you said, I believe you said it was a tie.
So if the superintendent says it's a tie, that's
It's a
it.
tie, right?
It's a tie.
No need to count.
That's the final.
The ruling
that's
has
the
been
final
made.
assessment. Yes.
I think I
So
lost.
we use the marshmallows as a way to talk about what it is we do, and then we take examples of parts and final end products and things with us, so
Right.
the kids can see.
Right.
Some pictures of our machines. We even often bring a video of our machines under power, and so the students can then ask, how do you get a job there? What kinds of engineering is it? And we often bring materials on how much money you can make, different ways in which the kids can connect between what you're taking in school, for example, and what kind of job you can get later in life.
Right, because actually my brother-in-law works in a mill where he's pressing steel to really, really, really thin levels. It requires a lot of math, punching in the right numbers, and obviously fractions or decimals.
Right.
So, and converting fractions to decimals. Really important stuff. And yet the kids often, when they're learning about fractions, are like, when am I ever going to use this? That's actually a really good example. And you guys do that.
Right. We're always changing decimals to fractions. We're about geometry, how things get turned, whether they're cylindrical, measurement to the tenths of an inch with regard to tolerance on a part. And even I think if you visit our facility, which Kerri has done, there are lots of opportunities to discuss math and engineering kind of concepts just as people walk through. So we think it's important to have access to students as they're learning so that they can make those connections. Oh, what do I have to take geometry for? Well, we can show you how you can put that to use.
So for the folks at home, picture a full grade of kids coming in to the gymnasium and having an opportunity to visit any one of these booths that they want to. And some of them have robots, some of them have remote controlled cars, some of them were flying little paper helicopters that they made over and then put them over a fan to see how they'd fly all the way up to the ceiling. Really fun and cool stuff. And I guess it left me wondering as a teacher and as an educator, what is it that is so cool about these events to kids, and can we translate that to the classroom?
Yeah, I think that we got a lot of feedback from the students and as well as the teachers that it was a great, like you were saying, like a real world application of what they're learning. And I think just like you said, walking in there, and we have 300 students at a time in the gymnasium with all these tables, but having a choice, a pathway, really is something that inspires them, because they really don't necessarily all the time get to choose what they can learn about. And so by going to these booths and having that choice and then applying it to something they're already learning, it kind of engaged them in a different way. And I think that we do that in the classroom a lot with different projects and having choice for outcomes of a project. So it was just like another way to give them a real world spin on what they're learning in the classroom.
Right. So that's you mentioned the pathway, and that's been on my mind a lot, just as a superintendent, but also as a principal before. Preparing kids for fields that are of interest to them is something that people ask me about a lot. Why don't we allow kids to explore more deeply engineering if that's something they have interest in? Instead of saying, well, you can take it as an elective, perhaps it makes sense to have a set of courses for somebody who's really interested in biotechnology, or somebody who's really interested in machinery, or mechanical engineering, or medicine. Why not say to those students, if that's something that you're interested in, you've always had a passion for it, and you don't see it changing, then these are the courses we'd recommend that you take. And if you take them, when you apply to school, you're going to be probably positioned better for post-high school education if you're going on to, post-secondary ed, to college or further training. You'll be better positioned because you can say, I've really focused my energies on this. And that's not to say it would substitute for, a high school diploma, because you could still get your high school diploma, but you might double up on sciences, for example, if that's a direction you want to go. And if we had these pathways that suggested to a kid, if that's the field you want to pursue, these are the kinds of courses you should take. What do you think about that?
I think that makes sense, and I think another part of that we need to add in probably is more information about what careers are out there, which is kind of why we did this in the first place. It started off with a career type of fair, and then we were thinking maybe do the high school. When we switched it to the middle school, we realized that we could put in more about education too, because not everybody needs to go the mainstream. I guess they just need to know what else is out there. There's the agricultural high school, there's the 2-year tech schools after high school. There's a lot of different kind of jobs that they don't know about that might suit them. And a lot of times what Paula was talking about with the gaps in education and employment happens with the middle skill level kids. And sometimes we try to just focus on them and give them the opportunity to see different career paths. And the pathways was really good because you could show them these are the kind of things you can do for education. You can talk to the union electrician. You can talk to the ROTC people from BU. You can talk to the robotics club because there's one in the high school. Oh, and there's a car over there for another education. Oh, and there's iRobot. So we added the educational piece in for the middle school because we thought it made more sense to see different things that could lead them into the pathway of the career. So instead of just a career fair, the pathway, kind of like what you were saying, it's part of that too.
So I just love that idea that kids, hadn't really thought about that, but they're gravitating to those things that interest them. So they just naturally find themselves looking at this thing. And one of the hardest things for us, I think, as Americans is trying to figure out what we're going to do with our lives. You frequently will talk to kids in college and they're like, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I don't know what, and they hate that question when the adults ask them, what are you going to do with your life? Because they're not really sure. But somebody helped me with that confusion by saying, well, what is it that you're drawn to? Like, what are you good at, was the way they put it to me. And I had never really thought about. The only thing I could come up with was that I always liked being with the kids. Even at family get-togethers, I didn't mind when I got stuck at the kids' table because I enjoyed being around kids. So that was a place to start. But in this Pathways to the Future fair, kids got to see a little bit about themselves, very young, learn a little bit about themselves, about what they liked, which is really cool. Did you get any feedback from kids about it?
My favorite line was a 6th grade boy coming out of the cafeteria or the gymnasium, heading back to class, and he turned to his friend without knowing that anyone was listening, and said, that was like taking a field trip without ever leaving the school.
That is
Mouths
great.
of babes.
Yeah, exactly.
That is perfect.
Yeah, we heard a lot of feedback after the fact from the students, and I think that it sparked conversations that they wouldn't necessarily have had. Talking about a future career or a pathway is not something that middle schoolers typically talk about normally. And yet they left there, and even just afterwards, just for those few minutes, you could hear them in the hallways saying, no, I think this one was better, or oh, I'd love to do that. And just even seeing that, like, maybe their best friend doesn't have the same pathway as them, but that they have different, like, again, draws and interests that, and I really think that they got a lot out of that, just even starting the conversation. And sixth graders, as young as sixth graders, we had sixth, seventh, and eighth. So for sixth graders to sit there and really think about what I like and what I don't like, it's a great place to start.
Yeah, no, really, it's fabulous. And what about the you know, we often hear that that there's a real shortage of women in the fields of science, and technology, and engineering, and especially math. I don't know about art, but certainly the bulk of the STEAM categories are not as well represented by women. So did you notice anything about the girls who were participating? Were they as active as the guys? Were they as interested?
I noticed they were equally as interested, and sometimes more. And I've taught middle school before, and now I teach high school, and I noticed that they seem more free to kind of be that way in middle school, and then something changes in high school. Sometimes they don't choose those fields as much as it seemed like they would. So sometimes that's why they say the middle school is the best place to start and continue that desire to be in these fields.
It's really important, and I think that that what you mentioned, Paula, about the fact that these careers, we don't even know today what the careers will look like 5 or 10 years from now. We don't know. We can speculate, but one thing for sure is that science, technology, engineering, and math, and art are not going anywhere. They are not going anywhere, and there is, if you look at just since the start of the Industrial Revolution, the amount of growth in society, in the world, in terms of technology, just the fact that my grandmother was born before planes were flying.
Right.
So that's not that long ago. We've now landed on the moon, and we're talking about taking trips to Mars for private citizens. I mean, things are moving quickly. And so I love what you said, that these jobs will be here, and our kids need to be prepared. So when people ask about this, I'm sure you tell them.
Well, if you think about even manufacturing and machining, the field in which I work, post-World War II, it was mostly a mechanized, non-computer, kind of dark, dirty, dangerous, people say. In my facility today, everything is run by a computer, so everything is programmed.
So they need to be computer savvy.
The machine makes the parts based on the program that's inputted into the machinery.
So they need to know how to program.
Right, they need to know how to program. It's very safe, everything's enclosed, there is no danger of losing fingers and the things that people worry about with manufacturing. It's very high tech, it's very clean, it's very streamlined. So just in terms of how people perceive these industries and what they look like today versus as little as post-World War II, again, that's not very long of a period of time. And it will continue to be rapidly evolving. I was recently at a conference about artificial intelligence, and the discussion was eventually artificial intelligence robots will be learning from humans, and humans will be learning from the robots. So it just really has no top end. And really it's about kind of exposing kids to a whole range of things. We had architects and we had, as Kerri said, an electrician. We had people who work with animals, veterinary, we had a dentist. So it was a very wide range of applications. And most of those connections came through our STEAM group. So somebody knew somebody who called somebody, and that's how we kind of brought it together. So I think that really it's just kind of throwing it out there, seeing how the kids and the teachers like it, and then improving on it and hopefully being able to repeat it again, and make it continuously shifting and changing to bring in new people and potentially new experiences.
Getting businesses to come into the schools and see what our kids can do, and getting the kids to see what businesses are out there and what jobs are out there is really important. We have an idea that we're going to have a round table with educators and business people to look at the curriculum in our classes to figure out where they can come in our schools and say, this is where this lesson can apply to the job in my company. And that would be the best. That's my dream.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great idea. So now as we think about STEAM, and you've all been really active in STEAM, can you speak to a little bit why art was added to STEM? For example, in your field, Paula, why would art be a good lead-in to your profession?
Well, the finish of the parts is important. You can make a lovely part, but it can, geometrically, or it can be within tolerance if it's all rough surfaced and doesn't look very nice, especially if in the end application it's going to be visible.
Like a finished product.
Correct. It's going to be on the exterior of a cabinet, or it's going to be the drawer pull, or we make parts that go into airplane cabins. So if you get on the airplane and the finish on your drawer pulls are all rough and ugly, you're not really going to be very impressed with that airline. So the finish of things, how things look, how you get them to look that way, polishing, deburring, all of those things are important. But there's also a lot of mathematics in art. There's a lot of mathematics. Think about drawing a blueprint, for example. Blueprints drive everything that we do. We make everything to some kind of drawing. So a person who's very interested in drafting or those kinds of skills would have an artistic potentially background, but also would have an application in our field. You think about how the statistics about music and how that improves a student's abilities. So it interacts with all of the other sciences and engineering, specifically for me.
Go ahead. Okay. I just think that sometimes we think of art as just like standard pencil to paper drawing type art, and what is really important to the rest of STEM is that artistic ability, which is really just creativity, like you were saying, design thinking, and that's something that without that art piece, I think the rest of STEM doesn't really work, because you really need to focus on that creativity. And whether it starts out as watercolor painting or designing a blueprint, it is creative thinking, and that's something that our students will need no matter what they do. But if they have that keen sense of art, they can go into all these other STEM fields and really succeed.
Well, think about an inventor. They don't go out and make their product,
exactly.
Right? They sketch it out. It might be on a napkin at dinner or whatever it is.
Like the flux capacitor.
Yes. So the person with that kind of mind to create is really important to science.
Yeah, businesses value the creative mind, and if your child is loving art and music, I don't think there's a stigmatism anymore where there's no jobs in that. I mean, they're valued highly by employers to be the chief officer of creativity in your business is a job that's out there now. And user interface is just the user interface job. Human-computer interaction is the second highest paying job under a doctor right now. So that's all interfaces with people, but it's mixed with psychology. Yeah, I guess what Jess was saying was it has to be a part of it. And in school, when you persevere in art and music, you're always persevering in an art class. You're never satisfied with your final product, and you're trying to solve a problem and you never give up. If you've been to a robotics competition, you know the same thing. They never give up. They're never satisfied. They keep going. So that's a valuable skill that can't really be taught. It has to be felt, and those are the kind of classes that where that lies.
I'm glad you said that. I couldn't agree more, and especially about the perseverance part. If you think about those of us who took art and had to throw pots on a potter's wheel, and tried it a few times and said, how many people tried it a few times and said, "No, I'm just not artistic," and then they gave up, when in fact it had very little to do with their artistic ability. It had to do with their perseverance, their willingness to keep on trying, to listen more carefully to how they're supposed to position their hands and where they're supposed to bring that pressure, or how much liquid, is there too much friction because there's not enough water and therefore your hands are grabbing. All these things are part of this learning process, and so I couldn't agree more. And I think that anytime we give kids an opportunity to be creative with their imagination, use your imagination, like Barney the dinosaur. Your imagination. Anytime we ask kids to use their imagination, we are prepping them for careers in STEM, but really life in general. So I'm wondering if, before we wrap up, were there any surprises from this event? Anything that kind of you just didn't expect to happen, or just jumped out at you, or you may have already talked about them?
I think people were more excited than maybe we were prepared for. I think we didn't know going in how the teachers and the students would react. In fact, the comments coming in were like, "Oh, what do we have to go to this thing before we have our picture taken?" And then once they got in the room, there was much more excitement about it. So I think that was surprising for them, maybe not us. We thought it was going to be fun, and we're big advocates of this kind of thing. But I think for the students, it seemed better than maybe they expected.
Yeah, with the middle school population is a tough population to work with and to keep engaged. And so I think when we were planning it, we were thinking about the time and how much time they would spend at each booth. And I think we actually underestimated how much time they really were staying engaged in it. And it was almost like you had to pull them out of there, which was unexpected but wonderful. That I think they were more engaged, even at that tough age, than we thought they were going to. And so in the future, maybe expanding the time so that they have more time to explore would be a great option.
I was surprised by so many teachers being so positive about it. I didn't think they were going to be negative, but I just didn't think about their reactions, and I was really thankful for all the positive comments they made towards us.
Well, anytime you walk into a space and you can feel the energy, you can actually feel the energy and the excitement and the enthusiasm with 300 kids, you know there's either something really good going on or there's big time trouble.
Right.
But in this case, there was something really good going on. And so I want to thank you, Jess and Paula and Kerri, for your vision and your perseverance and your willingness to take a chance and be imaginative and for the sake of the kids. I just think it's awesome. So thank you very much.
Thank
you
you.
for
Thank you.
being on our show.
Thanks.
And hope to interview you again.
Thank you very much.
After every one of the Pathways events.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A
Yep.
wrap up every time.
Yep. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.